Voices, the things they said. Voices, some from those dead. All the voices heard. Voices, things we say. Voices, they're in your head. All the voices heard.
Hello, everyone. You have Kempa.
And you have Skylar.
And you have Shannon.
And Flo.
And I am so excited to have this special guest today. We have Jen Abreu, the president and CEO of Redemption Row, California, joining us today. Jen, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for having me. I love it already. Yes.
Thank you. We are going to talk today about the nonprofit that you've started, right? Redemption Row, California. This is a fascinating nonprofit that you'll be able to really explain it better than I ever could. But, you know, this is something that you have launched with some pretty prominent prisoners, figures here in California's carceral system who are trying to transform from the bottom up the way that rehabilitation looks and feels. This includes people like Suge Knight. It includes, you know, the former head of the Mexican Mafia, you know, folks like this. And of course, you had the most recent win this past Friday on getting Sirhan Sirhan, the man who was basically he was what's the word I'm looking for? Convicted, yes, thank you, of killing Bobby Kennedy in 1968. This is his 16th run at parole. And you and the rest of the folks at Redemption Row have helped to actually get him recommended for parole. Now, that's not the end of the road there, but this is a huge national story. And so we're really happy to have you on today to talk about this. To begin, can you just tell us, before we get into Sirhan's case, what is Redemption Row, California, and how did you get started into this?
Absolutely. So prior to the pandemic, I was going into maximum security, all male maximum security prisons throughout Southern California. I was a conflict resolution facilitator with the only evidence-based self-help program that CDCR offers, and that would be outside of education. So the only self-help program—
Acronym alert, sorry, CDCR, California.
Yes, California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. Hey, it's all about the R. So anyway, they the Alternatives to Violence Project is what I was doing prior to the pandemic. And in March of 2020, all the prisons, you know, shut down with obviously everything else. And I couldn't get into the facilities. And, you know, programming is a huge part of prisoner rehabilitation. And when I was doing the AVP, Alternatives to Violence Project, I was driving out to Calipatria State Prison, which is the furthest southeast prison in California. So I always tell people, so if you think of California as a billiard table, if you're looking up and you're getting ready to rack the balls, Pelican Bay is going to be in your top left-hand corner pocket, right? Okay, Calipat is going to be in the bottom right-hand corner. And okay. It's just, you know, a couple of, like an hour or two out before you hit the border.
It's in the desert.
It's in the worst part of the desert.
Yeah.
It's an atrocious, terrible, barren place. But, you know, that's prime real estate for California prisons. So I was driving out from San Diego to Calipatria about every other weekend. And what I would do is I there's a list, and this list is very, very long. But I would take 25 men and lock them in a room with me all weekend. And we really go through a lot of deep issues concerning the triggers to violence. And we try and unpack those in a group setting. It's an experiential workshop. So it's definitely not me sitting or standing at a podium, pushing all this, information, into people. It's, we sit in a giant group circle. We do a lot of activities, a lot of things where we're linking up our arms as a group and we're running around the room. Oftentimes, people are falling down and I will end up on a pile of bodies. It never fails. But it's an amazing program. And that 25 people is the max I can have in a classroom at a time. Prior to the pandemic, so in 2019, I graduated almost 1,000 men from my program. Mm-hmm. And this is important because the way the data is structured, AVP is multifaceted in that it works to
acronym alert. Sorry.
AVP, Alternatives to Violence Project. Yeah, okay. It's okay. And so what it does is it's proven to reduce and mitigate the violence in prison, so in the prison yard and in the housing units as well. But once released, it actually decreases the recidivism rate by half. So if California boasts a obscene recidivism rate, which is at 65%, and that's up to 3 years post-release, then what AVP does is that it decreases it by 33%. So now you've got some really good odds there of not going back to prison.
Before this program, 2 out of 3 men are going back to prison.
Yeah. So what I do actually, and the way I start my program off usually is with some visual math. And what I do is I will make 10 men stand up. And I'll say, okay, this is going to represent 100% here. Now, 3 of you sit down. The rest of you are all coming back. Now, and that's the facts.
It's a math.
And that hits them really hard because now they can see it, right? And so I tell them, listen, if you go through this entire program, if you take the basic class, if you take the advanced class, and then you become involved as a mentor yourself, you're going to be really decreasing those numbers. It's a proven fact. So anytime I walk into a facility, you're getting a proven model of success, period. Inside, outside, it works together. So, and we know this to be true because of the studies that they've had on it, and because of, the captains, the lieutenants, the wardens, even the rank and file, they will all tell you, wow, things are really different now that your program is here. And so I'm leading all that up into the fact that it was so devastating when COVID hit and it locked all the programmers out. And so there's a lot of us that were trying to figure out, well, what do we do now? How do we even provide remote programming in prison, right? Because a lot of our stuff is not, pen and paper. It's it's experiential. So I can't really send in a whole bunch of material or homework because that's not what our program is based on. So, I did make up like 80 packets of identity work, and I worked with some professors here at the University of California, San Diego, and they helped me put together some really good stuff that the guys could work on, that they could, do some, small, easily read academic material on shame, guilt, and violence, and how all these things work together, and like little surveys and, comments. And, I got a good response back from the guys. But But then, that costs a lot of money.
Right.
It costs a lot of money. And I fund my activism out of my own pocket, which unfortunately looks like a lot of my own personal financial aid money that I get as a scholarship for going to UCSD. So I thought, well, this is not sustainable, right? So unfortunately, there was really no other means to provide the programming. Right before COVID hit, a few of my facilitators, my inside team, they had transferred from Calipatria over to Richard J. Donovan facility here in San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
And when they landed here in San Diego, they sent me some mail and they said, hey, we're in your backyard now. Normally that would be very disturbing, but for me, that gets me excited because that means I have my guys are right here. So they said, we want to be a part of whatever that you're doing here in San Diego. And if we're not doing anything here in San Diego, let's make something. And I thought, let's do it. I'm always down. These guys are super creative. And let's do something. Obviously, we're limited because of COVID. So we have to think of what we could possibly do. And we spent a lot of pretty much the whole course of 2020 just brainstorming on what would be advantageous. And then one of my lead teammates inside, he called me and he said, I got a guy I want you to talk to. I said, all right. So I hear the phone pass. And here comes this very recognizable voice. And hey, how you doing? This is Suge Knight. And I was like, oh, well, good evening, Mr. Knight. And he said, yeah, I hear you do great things. He's like, I got some great ideas and I'd love to run them by you. I want to do a music program and I want to somehow incorporate your academic nonviolent stuff into this music program, but I don't want it to be music either, just music. I want it to be, any kind of artistic medium. So it could be, creative writing, it could be spoken word, it could be poetry, it could be music. We can do whatever. And I said, okay, that's enough for me to go on. Let me start seeing what I can flesh out. And so it's just been.
Can I, for listeners
sure.
who don't know who Suge Knight is, this is the founder and CEO of Death Row Records, right?
Right.
One of the most influential rap record labels in history. Yeah. He had Snoop Dogg on during his rise. Mm-hmm. He famously got Tupac to sign, I think by paying his bail, by paying like $1.5 million in bail, and mm-hmm. Tupac came out and recorded with Death Row just some of the best work that he's ever done. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He's also worked with like MC Hammer, like just really folks that like have
a generational sound.
Yes, exactly. That's a great way to put it.
He worked closely with Vanilla Ice, from what I've heard.
I didn't know that.
I actually have that story on from the man himself. Yes.
I hope we have enough time to cover that.
I love it.
He is a central historical and cultural figure Absolutely. To this country. He also has sort of an infamous, his name certainly precedes him. Mm-hmm. It strikes fear in some people's hearts, right? He's a very imposing figure, and he is in prison, serving a sentence of 28 years, I think.
20 or 29, yeah. Mm-hmm.
For voluntary manslaughter. Mm-hmm. And he had pled guilty to that. And so, yeah, here we are. You're on the phone with this.
Can I just real quick,
American
I think
figure.
It like bears repeating just in case people aren't very familiar with Suge Knight, that Suge Knight, one of the things that Suge Knight is super famous for, and the only reason I bring this up is because it makes his involvement in this program like that much more impactful. Mm-hmm. But Suge Knight is super famous for being like a pretty violent guy. Exactly. He was like the gangster of mm-hmm. like a really hardcore period of gangster rap. He was mm-hmm. like the real deal guy who was like kind of too hardcore mm-hmm. for a lot of those guys. Mm-hmm. And so his his kind of his past as like a pretty violent person really, to me, really like it speaks to how cool and how important it is that he is now involving himself in this program that you work in, Jen. I think that really says a lot for it and says a lot for him,
Absolutely.
for how far that he's come.
It is, and it's a continuum with Suge. He knows this, so it's not a surprise. But of all the people that I have in my organization, I would say Suge is probably the one that is growing the most and has a lot of growing to do. And we're comparing him to mafia bosses and contract killers, right? So and it's all been a collective effort to we're gonna rebrand this man, and he's gonna do it, and he's gonna put the work in, and he is, and I'm really proud and impressed with the things that he has done and what he continues to do. So but just to get back on how this whole thing got brought up, or how we came up with this, was over conversations about what can we do right now, and there was no programming going on. We figured, we can start doing some parole board advocacy and board preparation. That's something that we can do without me coming into the facility. I have a very strong inside team, and these guys have been are hyper focused on lifers and getting them board dates. And up until last Friday, out of 20 lifers that they have prepared for the board, 19 of them are now on the streets and being positive members of society. Yeah, it really is. And I mean, it's not just like, oh, they're out. No, they're very active in their communities doing positive things, right? So that's a metric that I can get behind and I can believe in. And so we said, okay, I can do a lot of stuff on the outside. Obviously you guys know what you're doing on the inside, and what that ended up looking like is making sure paperwork is all together, that they have all of their files ready to go for the board, mock boards that they get ran through. I mean, like almost like 1 or 2 a week prior to their board date for a whole month, and really getting these guys ready for everything the parole board could possibly throw at them. And so I thought, this is great. This is great. This is a really good model. And so a lot of Redemption Row, we decided, we were trying to think, well, what do we call ourselves? We're really just kind of like this motley crew of misfits. We've got, mafia bosses, contract killers, and Suge Knight. We have, former, heads, they've all dropped out, but, former heads of every racial gang inside prison. And how in the hell do we get people to accept this group of badass people? And so we had a lot of names going around. I think somebody actually offered up Madam J's School for Refined Gentlemen.
I love it.
And so, but
I think that's the title of the movie they're going to make.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And so we, I'm a big fan of Karl Marx, and I said, well, we have to find the antithesis of what death row is. What is that? And it turned out to be redemption. And so we said, you know what, this is it. This is absolutely it. We're going to take the whole concept of death row and we're going to spin it and we're going to apply it for growth and positivity in the darkest place imaginable. And that's how Redemption Row, California came to be. And so now the whole time that we've really like laid the tracks down is we've been building curriculum the whole time. So when the facility is open, we can launch right into that. But until then, we started focusing more on parole board preparedness and advocacy. And we're using a lot of my crisis management, conflict resolution curriculum from the Alternatives to Violence project. We're kind of weaving in a lot of those themes because it's a proven model of success. We're taking a lot of critical, like intersectional and feminist, a lot of really touchy things that have never been interjected into a prison classroom before, and we're going to put it right in their face, because what these people have been doing has not been working. So we need to do something completely different, and so we're going straight radical, and it's all under the auspice of nonviolence, which it is. And unfortunately, what I saw was there's a lot of nonviolent programs out there, but that's really limited. What violence is the very last thing that happens. We got to talk about all the shit that leads up to being violent. The identity crisis. We have to talk about childhood trauma. We have to talk about toxic masculinity. So patriarchy, and these are things that they need to be introduced to for the guys that haven't been taking any kind of education classes. This is a brand new thing to them, and so
I'm looking at the epidemiologist nodding along. Flo, do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, you're already preaching a class. Like, I feel like you just talked about all the ways that the work has to intersect, and all of the far-reaching ways that it impacts people, right? And so, flipping I'm thinking about this talk I'm giving tomorrow about social determinants of health, and like flipping the dehumanization and distress and turning it into liberation and healing. That's and right. How that has to impact every single system that we interact with, because otherwise we just reinforce all of the ways that, harm is perpetuated. So you're preaching to the converted, I guess. It's no longer the choir, right?
Something that I'm really proud of that we brought into the program is at Richard J. Donovan has one, if not the largest trans population that's incarcerated. And so there's no programming for them, and very minimal for the LGBTQ community. They're in prison as well, but even amongst the LGBTQ community, the trans population is, almost a pariah, if you will. And so we said, Suge, you're right. We're going to do this music program, but let's do something so radical that people just are on their heels with it. Let's provide a support group for the trans community. And let's make this really inclusive. And that means all of my team who do not identify as LGBTQ are going to be sitting in these support groups, learning about trans issues and being trans and incarcerated. And this is what I've always called, this accordion method, because you're taking the top of the prison hierarchy, if you will, with these mafia bosses, Suge Knight, other gang leaders who would not normally be, affiliated with the trans community, and they're going to be learning all of these things, because when that happens, then the rest of the population will follow.
Yep.
And so
Right.
that decreases the violence and the harm against an extremely marginalized community. And since we have had those discussions and since everybody is fully invested in this, the trans population has they're overwhelmed with these other prisoners like Suge and Artie and Boxer and Cowboy. And, they're finding a lot of allyship with these men now, where they'll go to all canteen together and get ice cream, and they all sit on the yard and they talk, they walk the track together and they're learning. And so that's something I'm really proud of my guys, that they came up with this. This was not me. They brought it to me and they said, there is a need for this. The suicide, the self-harming, the overdoses in the trans community here in prison is so abhorrent. We have to stop it.
Yeah.
How do we stop this thing? Well, they only know how to stop it through their influence. And so that's something I'm really proud of, that doesn't get enough attention, obviously, because we haven't done it yet, because we can't get inside. And that kind of brings me, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, I just wanted to, because we're actually halfway through the episode already.
Oh my goodness.
So I wanted to move it forward a little bit. But we have a friend of the show, Bambi Salcedo of the Trans Latino Coalition. I believe she's a former inmate as well.
Yes.
And she has come on and spoken to us about that before, and the violence that trans women are subjected to outside of prison is incredible, and it is possibly even worse within a prison. So that's really incredible that they are taking the initiative to do what they're doing. If you have anything more to add, please do, but I do want to move it on to Sirhan Sirhan.
Yes, I'm definitely going to bring him in here, because Sirhan was actually brought to me by my inside team, and they said, you know what, this guy's going to go up to, he's going up for board, and he has no help. And this is a 77-year-old man who we all adore inside. We love this little guy. And he was little.
5'5", 120 pounds. He wanted to be a jockey, right? A horse jockey. Yeah.
Oh.
And so, yeah, he's very much a recluse inside prison, because he has had 2 attempts on his life. The last one being he had his jugular cut, and a lot of the tendons in his neck, and it was right in the middle of the prison yard. And a lot of my guys that are in Redemption Row were witness to that. And
this was in 2019. Do we know anything?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't in 2019.
No.
I'm not, I think it might have been right before that.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought I read that he was stabbed in 2019.
No. It might have been like 2017 or 18.
Okay.
It was right after actually, no, that's not true. I think it was right before his last parole date. And I could be wrong, but I want to say that he was definitely talking about his throat being cut in his 2016 hearing.
Okay.
So
yeah,
it might have happened right around there.
The Guardian said in August 2019.
I don't know.
I don't know. I could be wrong.
Yeah. So a lot of the guys inside, they said, we don't want him here anymore. He's got to go home. This is ridiculous. Enough is enough. Validated gang members who have in-house cases of murder and stabbing cops, who have, shitty institutional history of behavior write-ups, low education, not a lot of positive programming, are getting released. Why is this man still here? Right? He's been behavior free for 53 years. He graduated with his AA with a 4.0. He has done every possible programming there is to do. What the hell? And
right.
they said, we have a plan. And now this kind of goes back to.
Can I pause and ask,
yes.
What the hell?
What the hell?
What is the reason for this? Why? Men who have done the same and worse have spent less time in prison and got out earlier. The LA Times did a good opinion piece on this, but I wanted us to sort of discuss that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, unfortunately, the powers that be believe that a Kennedy's life is more valuable than, say, anyone else's. And that's really what it comes down to. Because you cannot, and in my testimony, I did a comparative analysis with a bunch of former gang members who I had met up with on the street and said, hey, I need your help in this historic moment. Are you willing to go on the record with your personal information and compare it to Sirhan? And they said, yeah. So I have a good cross section of a lot of former validated gang members that were part of my testimony. And, you know, a lot of guys have multiple bodies, multiple homicides. Nothing is comparable to what Sirhan is. And for the record, Sirhan was convicted of murder one, not a political assassination or a terrorist act. Murder one, just like 80% of all the people in prison right now, right? So what everybody is telling me, or what the press will tell you, or in even, you know, common discourse will be, well, he's an assassin. He killed Senator Kennedy. He's an assassin. Well, if that's what we're going to hang on to, then I would direct you to look at the case of Hampeg Sassounian, who is an Armenian man who was convicted by a jury of his peers as being a political assassin. And he killed a Turkish diplomat in the early 80s in Los Angeles. And he said, I killed him because he was failing to recognize, you know, the Armenian genocide. And he killed him for his political beliefs. He did 40 years. They just released him. The board just released him. It went to Governor Newsom. Governor Newsom said, absolutely not. The 4th District picked it up and they said, you know what, we're going to vacate Newsom's decision. Let him go.
So Newsom got overruled.
Exactly. So that makes that leads us into a huge thing. So you can't have it both ways. Either Sirhan is a political assassin, and then you must follow what Sassounian did and was released, or Sirhan is only convicted of murder one, and you have all of these validated gang members who have been convicted of multiple murders and in-house cases of murder who are now out. Which one do you want to go with? Because either way,
you lose.
It makes a shitty argument.
Yeah.
It makes it look like the state of California and California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation is a rogue agency. They are basing their decisions off of their own personal biases and the influences of others.
Yeah.
Right. I was a victim representative for the last living victim at the Ambassador Hotel, and it is his dying wish. The man is 96 years old. It is his dying wish that Sirhan be released. So when you have other people that are coming out, like the Los Angeles Police Department, making a statement saying that we're gonna speak for the victims, and the Kennedy family says,
since when?
Right. And we even had
define the victim.
Bobby Jr. Had a letter written, read in the testimony at the hearing that said, you know, the Los Angeles Police Department does not speak for my family. They have not ever, nor will they ever. They are not elected by the people. The DA's office is.
So can we run it back a little bit?
For sure.
Can you talk about the argument for his release? You gave a statement at the hearing, and I want to give folks some sort of a look into sort of the bureaucratic process here too. So what this hearing on Friday, August, what is that, 27th, was basically to two folks on, I don't know, are they on the parole board or?
Yeah, it was the commissioner. It was the commissioner of the parole board.
And they are determining if they will recommend that he become eligible for parole, go in front of a parole board, and then once they do or do not, say, oh yeah, he's up for parole, I don't see any mistakes the two of you did here, then it goes to Governor Newsom's desk. Am I correct there?
It's a little fuzzy, and the process of that gets a little muddied. And I am not a lawyer, so I play one on TV. That's it. The way I understand it from the hearing and Sirhan's legal team is this was a 2-person panel. Usually you end up having a 3-person panel, and because of COVID, they had a 2-person panel. For that was the reasoning that we were given. They are there to find him suitable for parole. And it was extremely evidence-based. It was all based on his rehabilitation. It was all based on his programming and his, half-century long behavior-free record.
As it should be. This is what a parole hearing is about.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. It is based on the evidence and all the mitigating factors that make him a non-risk to the public if he were to be released. And
right.
What in my testimony, what I did is I fleshed all of those out for them. Okay. In fact, the commissioner at one point in time even told me, he said, Ms. Abreu, you're getting into a legal argument here and not a victim impact statement. And I was like, you're damn right I am. Sometimes we got to do that. What I understand going forward is this is actually it has the possibility to go to a full panel. But the way I understand the logistics of this to be, and I could be wrong, but the way it has been told to me is this is going to go straight to Newsom's desk. He then can make a decision, or he can then boomerang it back to a full panel. Now, the commissioner, when he gave his determining factors, he laid down the reasoning that the reason that they came up with his suitability was a legal argument. And after everything was over and I was on the phone with Sirhan's legal team, they said, we go into all these parole board hearings all the time. We've never heard a commissioner lay down a legal argument for his findings because he knows it's coming back to a full panel. And probably politically what's going to happen, we are in a recall election. Gavin will probably not want to have his hands anywhere on this thing.
He's going to kick the can down the road. I don't think
Gavin wants to be within 100 million miles of this thing, right?
Exactly.
Not in the next 30 days. Yeah.
Right. No. And so probably what he will do is then, default it back to the full panel. And that's what the commissioner set up was, and he actually said, I know a lot of my colleagues are not going to be happy with this. So let me ground you in my decision. Right. And he did. And his decision and the way he laid it down was very thorough. It was very sound and it was very logical. And so it's going to be, I would imagine it would be very difficult for anybody on that panel to not look at it pragmatically without any personal bias, because the evidence speaks for itself. So then what will happen is if they decide to overrule that 2-person panel, then the legal team is ready with a writ to go into the 4th district real quick with that.
Okay. I just wanted to say that there were 2 opinion pieces that came out in California media that struck me. One of them by Nicholas Goldberg, a columnist at the LA Times. And he obviously spoke with you because you are mentioned in here. And he says, basically he lays out the argument you just did, that a parole process, a parole hearing has very straightforward questions and answers. And he's saying that what has happened here, and the reason Sirhan Sirhan has not been released already, is because of some greater cultural implications, some greater rage of, this political ecosystem we find ourselves in today. And then there's another piece in the Sacramento Bee by cartoonist Jack Ohman, who basically makes this emotional argument, right? The appeal to emotions that doesn't even address what an appeals process is about, right? Or what a parole process is about. And I think that's what this comes down to, and that's what Governor Gavin Newsom has to look at. My question, I guess, to you or anyone is, like, how do we anticipate this man who has said publicly that Bobby Kennedy was an idol of his, right? Someone he looked up to. How do we expect this multimillionaire Democrat to respond to something like this?
Well, we are all equal under the law. A life is a life. And I imagine, the mom on, the street whose son just was hit by a bullet from a gang member's gun, cried for her son's life just as much as Rose Kennedy cried for her son's life. There's no difference there. A life is a life. And this is, a lot of people are super attached to this name and this person. Doesn't make his life more valuable than mine or Dr. Flo's, and we have to stop moving the goalposts for people with money and are in power, because that's what it comes down to. And if that were the case, shit, ain't nobody coming out of prison then, right? So it's, people need to stop adding on to Sirhan. He is not a political assassin. He, plain and simple, they could have charged him with it, but they didn't. Murder won. And so we have to start, change the discourse, look at the facts. And we can get into conspiracy theories, all of those fun things, but the truth of the matter remains the same. A life is life, and murder one is murder one. And by all, and one of the arguments I made to the commissioner was, this man should be the poster person for prison rehabilitation. You should be thrilled with this person and everything that he's been able to accomplish, and showing him off as a model, for other people. And unfortunately, those things don't happen. And there is a shift in thought, and I will tell you this from what I know to be true on the inside, is in my team's getting him ready for his parole.
Who was on your team prepping him, by the way? I'm dying to know that.
Okay, do you want actual names? I can give you actual names.
I mean,
yeah, for sure. I have my chief.
I'm just picturing a bunch of folks talking through
my chief operating officer. His name is Joel Baptiste. He goes by Cowboy. He is a former general in the Aryan Brotherhood. We also have Suge Knight. We have Artie Guzman, who was very high up in the Mexican Mafia, and then we have Boxer Martinez, who was part of the Norteño crime syndicate. And I have James Daly, did like 30 years in the federal system. He's my chief financial officer. He was in the Aryan Brotherhood as well. And I have he's not in Donovan, he's in another facility. I also have, let's see, Cameron Morris. He's a former Crip that's at Donovan. And I feel like I'm missing, Michael Goodwin. And everybody's going to scratch their head and go, who the hell is Mike Goodwin? Everybody knows Mike Goodwin, but you don't know Mike Goodwin. Mike Goodwin was started off as what we call the father of Supercross. So he's the one who was like, it'd be a really good idea. Let's bring all these motorcycles into a football stadium and run them up the bleachers and put all this dirt in there, right? He started that. Well, he was convicted of a double homicide for the killing of Mickey Thompson, his business partner, and his wife Trudy back in the 80s. And so Mike is my second case I'm taking on right now. And we're going to be presenting a lot of evidentiary findings in his case to Gascon's office. And I will tell you that will kind of parlay into some Harvey Weinstein things. So it's a crazy web.
Can I pause us and just like reflect on all of these names and where they're all coming from?
Right.
This is unheard of to hear people from all of these very disparate, historically acrimonious backgrounds to come together to help Sirhan Sirhan.
Yes. You know why? Because Sirhan embodies the complete and totality of the prison population. And let me tell you how that goes. Sirhan is a youth offender. Sirhan is an immigrant. Sirhan was on death row, and then his sentence turned into life without parole. So he's a lifer. Sirhan also is an elderly prisoner as well. So he has completely run all the way through the prison spectrum of who he represents, right? The only person besides Sirhan who's been incarcerated as long is Tex Watson, who is also on that yard, who I also work with very close. I work with Charles. And
he's on your team too.
Charles is not on the team.
Oh, okay.
But Charles is someone who has great interest in our organization and has reached out to my chief operating officer and said, hey, does Jen know that I go to board at the end of the year too? And I've talked to Charles several times on the phone, and what a unique individual. Every time I come away from a conversation talking to Tex, I feel like I've just spent 15 minutes, drinking lemonade on a porch swing with my favorite uncle.
I don't think we told listeners who he is.
Well, so Tex Watson, he is a central member of the Manson family. In fact, Tex is the one everybody, I hope knows, Charlie Manson never killed anybody, that he was convicted of. The Sharon Tate murders and the LaBianca murders in the Manson case, that was Tex. And the girls, Leslie Van Houten, I think, is coming up for parole this year as well. So that's going to have a huge kind of a wake for Tex as well. So,
and the Manson followers, I think at least two of them have notoriously been denied parole by Governor Newsom, which again ties in with if you are a person of means, if you are a person who's well known, then your death matters more than another person's.
Of course. And so, we do, when it goes back to kind of like our cross section of people that are under the Redemption Row banner, if you will, is really amazing. Anybody that knows anything about gang history or has lived in California, I would imagine, knows the beef between, Norteños and Sureños in that whole violent world. And you have two of those leading mafia bosses putting everything aside, coming under, one flag now, which is Redemption Row, and saying what means more to us as we become aging inmates is how do we turn all of this stuff that we used to do into positive power, and how do we apply that now to, for lack of a better word, get the homies out. Let's get people, we got to do this, and we have to work. And it's not about just getting people ready for board and getting them out. There is an absolute process. There is a lot of education that has to happen. There's a lot of insight that has to occur. And it's not easy. It is not easy at all. And if it was easy, everybody would fucking do it, but they don't. And so what we're doing is providing that means. If you're serious about your freedom, come over to the row and we'll take care of you. And so that's what we do.
Oh my God, that's just incredible.
I think it is so cool to have like this system, and I don't know, Jen, if where you're at with this side of things, but like for a lot of us, at least, for somebody like me who's not as familiar with it from the outside, it doesn't look like the justice system, at least in California, is really set up to rehabilitate people at all, right? It looks to somebody like me like the primary sort of goal of the justice system is punitive, is to punish people, is to, well, you did a bad thing, and so in return your life must be somewhat or completely destroyed, it basically out of revenge, right? And it typically seems to be how we view justice and how the system sort of functions. And so it is so cool to see a bunch of inmates who are caught up in the system be like, you know what, if you're not going to rehabilitate us, we will rehabilitate ourselves in spite of your efforts to stop us, which is absolutely incredible. I mean, I think that ties into sort of the controversy around Sirhan, right? Is because I think it really lays bare the two kind of different mindsets around criminal justice, which is, well, is it about we take people who may have made a bad decision or may have made a mistake, and we rehabilitate them and we bring them back into the fold, and we facilitate a healing process? Is that what we're set up to do? Or is it just, you screwed up and somebody got hurt, and so we will take a pound of flesh, or in some cases we will take all of your flesh in revenge for what you have done or what we perceive that you have done? And I don't I think at the side that all five of us come down on the show is pretty obvious, but I think that's what really makes like that, you know, the guy from the Bee, the cartoonist from the Bee's piece about like, well, this guy should just die in prison or whatever, is just like, well, then what do you believe? Like, what does that say about what you believe about, I mean, humanity to a degree, right?
The same people that say that are sitting in church on Sunday.
Right.
Let's be very clear about that, you know? And, you know, I've seen all of, you know, the hate comments on there, let him rot, let him die, da, 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 da. And, you know, understand, even though I am not I do not believe in the prison system. I think we can do way better. But prison is the last social safety net that we have, right? This is where you're supposed to go to become rehabilitated, so you can come back and be part of society. And if that's not the model, then all we're doing is warehousing humans. So, you know, what kind of a nation are we then, right? And you're absolutely right, Skylar. It's those kind of articles, although they're, you know, difficult to read, unfortunately, that's the United States, you know, overall opinion about people in prison. I help bad guys, and everybody doesn't like the person that helps bad guys until they're the bad guy, and then they want my help.
Right. And this is why we have no transparency in our prisons. We have no idea the horrific thing that guards are doing to folks who are incarcerated, because we dehumanize them over and over again. And we refuse to approach them as humans. We refuse to try and provide them the same respect that anybody on the outside has.
That's a whole nother show we can get into.
It is.
Yeah, no kidding.
Wow.
A whole show.
The things I've witnessed personally and things that I know that occur is literally it could be an entire series, and someday I will have to do that. But it's disheartening, especially when you know, you have federal judges coming down and mandating that the you know, the correctional officers have to wear body cameras because they've been beating the shit out of the ADA inmates, you know, handicapped inmates, you know, I mean, just brutalizing them, people that need extra care, brutalizing them. And it was so bad that you know, the cops there have to wear body cameras, and now they're protesting that and not coming to work. So now you have hardly any cops coming to work because they don't want to be held accountable for their behavior. So you have, you know, a a prison that, is probably at, anywhere from 32 to 3,500, prisoners. And right now, I'm probably less than 100 cops working it. That's not safe. So rapes are higher. And who's getting raped? The trans community, right?
Right.
You have, a lot of overdoses. How's that happening when there's no visitation? It's not like they've been squirreling away dope for, 18 months. I guarantee you that's not it.
Right.
You have, hiding COVID deaths. It's really slimy and it's really dirty. And Californians need to know what they're paying for and what they're not. Because when you talk about prison and prison rehabilitation, nobody knows what goes on behind the wall. And that's not, it's for a reason.
Damn it, Jen.
Yeah.
Now we have to have you on like immediately after this episode.
And that's the thing, and people need to understand, prison is a public institution that is kept the most private.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have no idea what goes on behind those doors.
We don't know what prison rehabilitation looks like and what it doesn't.
Right.
And it's and part of
which is why your work is so important.
It is. And I run my mouth, and this is why the guys put me in charge. And I just kind of wanted to like tap in with that really quick, and is, this is a prisoner-led organization. I'm just the mouthpiece because I'm just the one on the outside. These guys run the show inside. They make all the decisions. They come up with, listen, Jen, this is the plan going forward. This is who we're going to take on now next. This is where we're going to focus our energies are now over here. And I say, okay, give me what you have. And then I like to weaponize my whiteness and push it all forward. And that's how I got into that parole board hearing room, is because of those men.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really, really important to me, because
that they're leading, that this is
that they are, because
yeah.
Programs that are not built that way in prison fail. They fail. You cannot be a bunch of outside people coming in and going, all right, this is what you're going to do it this way, do what I say, da, 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 da. It doesn't work. And it
right.
fails.
That's charity. It's not solidarity.
Really, exactly. And so this is built from the inside on out. So I'm just the mouthpiece. That's really all I am.
I love it. We only have a few minutes left with you. So I guarantee listeners are going to want to know how they can support you and your work and everyone else's work on the inside with everything they're doing. So how can people tap into Redemption Row, California and help you continue to do what you're doing?
Thank you. So we don't take any type of CDCR stakeholder money. We take donations from every type of person on the street. And so everybody can find us and donate if you would like at redemptionrowcalifornia.com, everything all spelled out, even California. And I have put up a bunch of really great content, some videos, pictures of my guys, my inside team. We're trying to get some new stuff going on in there. I've got the Sirhan thing up there, and I have donation links. So we can be found on Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. And every little bit goes to operating costs. I do not take a penny of this money for myself. Everything really goes for me, printing material, money on the phone, all of those things. And just to let you guys know and your listeners, I went into this fight on Friday and provided, a 10-minute testimony in Sirhan's rehabilitation evidence. And I did it with less than $200 in our corporate account, and we won. So that's how powerful real people power can do. It's really not, the money does help, don't get me wrong, but we were able to do that with hardly any money. I built a cheap ass website with some donations that were given to me, and we just kept plugging along. And we had a very profound impact in that room, in so much that the commissioner said to Sirhan, whatever it is that you've been doing with Jen and Redemption Row, California, please keep doing that, because you have shown the most growth from your last hearing to today. It's a miracle what she's been able to do with you. And that really hit me. But it's not me, it's my inside team. They're the ones who've put in all the work. I've just been pushing the paper out here. So, you know, we keep, you know, kind of pointing our fingers at each other going, you know, great job, great job, great job. But it was really all a team effort, and everybody feels some ownership in this. And that's what really makes this a giant win. So please come find me. We have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all set up under Redemption Row, California. You have a TikTok too.
I saw that.
We do have a TikTok. We do have a TikTok.
I'm younger than you, and I'm terrified of TikTok. I was like, mad at myself for not having one. We just have a couple of things out there, but we're definitely in the process of making some new stuff and getting some new material out there. So it'll be a good kind of overview of the guys in Redemption Row, and, you know, just learn about them a little bit individually, and then what we do as a whole. So I'm my team, man. I love them. Jen, thank you so much for joining us. You and all the guys on the inside are incredible, and what you've done with so little is a testament to what you can do with more. So I hope people do help support you. And I mean, I guess that's more or less our show. Just from the bottom of my heart, thank you for coming on today.
Thank you. I thank you so much for having the space. Thank you, Shannon, Skylar, Dr. Flo. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for coming on.
Incredible.
I wonder, before we jump off, Dave, if you could help me with a thing. Speaking of outsized and undeserved punishment, if there was a way to subject somebody to twice as much of this show for just a nominal fee, what would be the fastest way to get yourself kind of worked into that system in a way that is very difficult to ever escape from?
I like this. Paying us to torture you more. It's like cock and ball torture, right? It's oh God, this is
just like that. I often use that.
Same but different.
It's exactly that. That's what I tell
Dr. Flo just did the puppy head tilt. Like, what?
Flo, don't yuck anyone's yum. You always say that.
Flo.
I'm not yucking your yum. I'm just more so like, isn't this the radio show?
No, it hit me. I got that a little late. Anyway, we are, I mean, if you want, you can become a patron for as little as $5 a month. But if you're really into getting hit square, you can go as high as $25 a month. You'll get a coffee mug and a t-shirt out of that, and just our lifelong friendship. We are online at voicesrivercity.com, Facebook, Voices River City, Twitter and Instagram at Voices River City. I personally am on Twitter at Unokempo, YUKNOWKEMPA.
You can find me tweeting my opinions, which are my own opinions and do not represent the views of anybody else, at Guillotine for You. That is Guillotine, the number 4, YOU.
I'm Shan N.D. Stevens.
And I am at Flojaune, FLOJAUNE.
And Jen, is there any way that our listeners could find you?
Yes, absolutely. They can find me on Twitter. I'm at JDeuce619, JAYDEUCE 619. I also have a Redemption Row Twitter as well. And if there's anybody left on Facebook, I'm JDeuce under on Facebook as well.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, guys.
All right, I think let's go ahead and put a pin in this one for now. If you are still listening to this, we want you to know that we love you and we want you to stay safe.
Stay sane.
Stay healthy.
And I can't believe I have to say it again, but stay the fuck away from me. This is the third surge. It's
very frustrating that we have to keep saying that.
The third of many more to come.
Oh, sweet Lord.
Surge all through time.
Riding it hard like a Honda Civic, right?
All right.
That's a perfect note to end it. Yeah.
Oh, goodness.